deformers, and basically these purple objects up here, to manipulate our object in different ways. Let's turn off the visibility of our initial guy. And then with this, what we can do is start to bring in a deformer. So let's say we want to use a bit of a bend. Now, we'll bring the bend in, but it's still not applied here. Okay, it's just this little purple box. So even if we did something to it, it wouldn't do anything to our model. So what we need to do is parent it underneath the geometry. Now, we also need to kind of fit the deformer to the model. And one way that we can do this very quickly is just to say fit to parent, and that'll automatically fit that to our model. Now, another way to do it would just be to scale it and move it into position. Now from here, we can change the strength. So you can see here, it's bending it off to the side, so we can sort of change that angle. So if I set that angle to 90 degrees, we get a little bit of a bend to the back. Okay, you can change and modify the size here, and you can see that any part that's outside of that deformer is not being affected by the deformer. So, if you only want to bend the top, we can move it up sort of to the top and bend it that way. Okay. So we've got a bend on here. We can also add something like an FFD. So this is a freeform deformer. Let's drop it under our capsule and let's fit to parent. And this FFD allows us to select these points based on the number of grid points here. We can select those points and that will modify our mesh. So let me go to model. See that? There we go. And I'll select the FFD. And then we can sort of move this, or let's actually rotate it a bit. Okay, maybe select the point on the back and move that. And so we can use that to sort of distort things as well. All right. Now, once we are happy with the shape that we've got here, we can go in here and say, I want to make the current state, I want to set that to the object. So current state to object, it makes us a copy. So if I turn off that initial one, it makes us a copy of that with all of the deformations baked in. So this is the one that has the deformers on it, which we can go back and change. Okay, and then this one, what we call baking, has it sort of baked down. So let's delete this initial one. And then I want to build in the kind of area for the eye. So let's take this and we're going to go to manipulate the polygons. We'll choose a live selection and let's select the area where we want this eye to be. We need to create an opening here. So to do that, we'll right click and we'll do an extrude inner. So extrude it in like that. And let's maybe do one more. And then I'm just going to delete that. Now we can start to manipulate the points. So select the points on these two sides and kind of pull this down. And we don't really need to add too much in the way of, making it very detailed. We just want to get that sort of opening there. Now I also want some thickness to the opening. And so let's select these edges. I don't need the ones on the back or down there. And then let's do just a regular extrude. And I'm just going to pull this back and in. So something like that. So we create this sort of hole with thickness. Let's add a sphere to our scene here. This is going to be the eye. So we select the sphere. I'm going to rotate it a bit. And then I'm going to increase the radius a little bit. Let's move it back. So something like that. Now I want to create the detail for kind of the iris and the pupil for this. So there's a few different ways that we can do this. Let's take our sphere. I'm going to make it editable, and I'm just going to select, oops, go to our polygon tool, select these polygons. Let's do an extrude inner, something like that, and then I'm just going to push it in. Okay. Let's now take that and we'll just extrude that in slightly. And I'm just going to go to loop selection, or edges, or under polygons, delete those, select that whole thing and scale it up a little bit so it's right behind there, but there's a sharp line. And now, considering that we're going to be smoothing this, what we can do is add some extra lines in here, but we don't really need to do that just yet. So now we've got our basic geometry, we've got our basic eye. So in the next lesson, let's take a look at using some of Cinema 4D's really cool sculpting tools to continue sculpting. And that'll give us a bunch of these sculpting tools, and this is going to allow us to do something a little bit different with our polygon model. Let's go to our Use Model tool. Now I'm using a Wacom pen, and it's an Intuos tablet along with the grip pen that goes along with that. So it's going to be pressure sensitive, so it's going to be the best way to go about doing this. We use Wacom products in all of our courses. We highly recommend those, but if you have another kind of tablet, the important thing is that the pressure sensitivity is there so that you can begin sculpting on this in a very intuitive way. So the first thing that we need to do is hit this subdivide. And when we hit this, it's not going to change visually, but you'll see over here that we now have this level 0. When you have kind of a slider here, we also have this base object listed. If we go into our objects, object manager, you'll see that there's now a sculpt tag that has been added to our model. That's going to allow us to sculpt. Now, before we actually subdivide this anymore, it hasn't subdivided it. All it did was add the tag, but we can still sculpt on the low resolution mesh, and it's just kind of an intuitive way of shaping this at this point. So let's grab the grab tool here, and what we want to happen is I want to do this symmetrically. So within the grab tool, you can see that there's an area for symmetry. Let's turn on symmetry across the X, and so we can sort of see where that's happening there. And I also want to link the symmetry so that that'll be linked to the other brushes that we choose. All right, now I can come in and I can change the size of the brush by middle mouse dragging sideways. Okay. And then once I get it to the place I want it, I can come in here and I can begin to just click and drag, and it's basically just taking these points, and we're just able to sort of shift them around a little bit very quickly. Let's come into the back and we'll sort of pull these in a bit. Now once we've done that, let's subdivide this a little bit more. Well, let's actually take this eyelid out past the eye a bit. So we have the eye here, the eye shape here to be able to match it to, so that's good. Let's bring this out a little bit. Let's hit subdivide again. So now we've hit subdivide again, so we have more polygons now that we can work with. We can move down, up and down the subdivision levels here by hitting these buttons, or we can use our slider here. But now we can come in, and maybe our brush size is a little bit smaller, but we can still use grab at this point because we're so low res. We can start to kind of build in the basic structure here. So if there's any shape changes that need to happen, we can do that. Let's subdivide again and again. We can turn off our lines, and you can see we can get up into, we're at 74,000 polygons at this point, which is fairly high. Let's go ahead and go to pull now, and pull will allow us to pull out detail. So it's, instead of grabbing, we're stroking across the surface, and then we're able to sort of raise that detail. If I hit shift and stroke, I can smooth that back into the surface. Okay, so now I can, with this particular brush, I can drag sideways to change the brush size, or I can drag up and down to change the pressure. So I'm going to bring this eyelid out a little bit and start to add in some sort of wrinkling across here, maybe coming across the back, and just sort of adding a little bit of detail in here. And there are different kinds of brushes that you can experiment with. The wax brush is cool. It kind of gives the impression of adding material on. And so what we want to do is just come in here and start to add a little bit of this detail. We can come in and add a bit of detail along the legs, kind of smooth that out a little. Okay, we can use the knife to cut areas in. You can see how that's cutting those areas in a little bit, and come back in and sort of smooth them out a bit. You can also jump back down to a level and smooth it out at that level, and that'll help a little bit as well. You can also go in and use something like flatten. So if you wanted to just flatten out this part right here, you could sort of flatten that area right around the eye. Come in here and kind of do the same thing. Maybe flatten that area out, and then use pinch to kind of pinch those edges together a little bit. Okay, and we could sort of use the knife to bring in a bit of a crease here at the corner of the eye. Kind of come in here. We could come underneath here and begin to add some sort of divisions across the bottom of our tentacles here, depending on how we want to do that. I'll bring those lines across here. And we'll just do the same thing on these other ones. And they're symmetrical, so that should work fine. Can sort of come in here and add a little bit of detail coming across here, and kind of smooth that back out. We can also come in along here and start to build out. Let's use wax kind of in these areas, sort of start to build those out a little bit on the inside of our little tentacles. So just have a little fun with it. What you do doesn't matter so much as just knowing when you subdivide how to do that, and then start to bring that detail in. Okay, so at some point you can start to bring in some smaller scale wrinkles and kind of define these a little bit more. So, you know, underneath the eye, can kind of smooth that back out a little bit. Can add a little bit more detail coming in here on the corner of the eye. Maybe this sort of curves back. We can also, if we hold down Control, we can push in areas and then smooth them out with Shift. So you can go very quickly from pulling out to pushing in to smoothing just with a couple of clicks. And go back in with your knife and sort of add some of those lines in there coming across. Like I said, just have a little fun with it. You can always go back also and use grab to shape. Keep in mind when you're using this at a high level that you can have the tendency to create sort of lumpy effects as we're doing kind of here. And so just be aware of that. You know, sometimes you might want to come down, back down to the lower levels and do it there. So if we want to give this guy a little bit more of an attitude, you can sort of bring this down a bit. And then we can go back up and begin to sculpt from there. I'll start to sculpt in the wrinkles here. Okay, so let's spend a little bit of time just adding some of this detail. You might also want to take some detail kind of coming up this way. Wax might be a good option to do that as well, as it's sort of, he's got this sort of frown. Can come in and start to add some detail going in that direction as well. And then you can sort of pinch those lines together to create the lines, maybe smooth them back out a bit. All right, so we'll spend a little bit of time adding, but this is kind of what I've done, just kind of some detail around the eye area. And so let's say now, though, that we want to create more of a skin type texture in the sculpt. So we want to subdivide it. I've subdivided mine up to level 6, so I've got looks like around 1.2 million almost polygons. And you need enough polygons to be able to hold the detail. So we can come in here, and under stamp we can start to add an image to use as a stamp to kind of copy across the surface. I'm going to use a preset brush that already has this all set up. So let's go over to our content browser. I'm going to go into presets, and let's go into sculpting, sculpt brush presets, and there's a lot of different options in here to use. Let's just go ahead and choose organic, and then we can come in and choose one of these patterns in here. So there's sort of like skin, there's snake skin. Let's try one of these veiny type of patterns here. So if I double click on that, you can see now that we have an image that's loaded up based on the brush that we selected. So now you can see our brush has a particular size here. We can go into this and we can change the size. If we just stroke across the surface, you can see it adds this really nice sort of texture to it. If you hold Control, it pushes that in, okay? And so let's make sure to turn on symmetry, okay? And I'm going to take the strength down a little bit and also the size down a little bit as well. All right. I'm going to come in and just add a little bit of this skin detail across the surface. So I know it's being placed on the other side as well, so I'll just kind of bring it in up along the top here and just real lightly kind of cover some of these open areas. And you can see how that's sort of a different effect than sculpting in those large scale wrinkles. You're getting this kind of skin texture across the surface. In these smaller areas, you might want to dial your brush down a little bit. You can come along the tentacles here a little bit and add some of that kind of along those. Okay, and then you get something like that. You can come in here and add, if you want to add a kind of a smaller scale, you can come in with a smaller brush here, maybe across the front. And you can experiment with some of these different brushes. So coming in here, there's different sort of skin patterns. I'm just double clicking on that, and you can see I can start to add kind of a skin wrinkles in here. So maybe we can come in here and right along the where these wrinkles are, maybe that would work. Come and add that in there. So I just encourage you to kind of experiment a little bit with those presets. Now these are the organic presets. If you come back here, you can see there's all kinds of stuff that you can come in. A lot of these are mechanical, but you also have things like stone, which can often work for skin as well, depending on what kind of creature you're looking at. You've got all these sort of stone patterns, and a lot of those can work as well. So even if you grab something like the stone, you can see you can add some bumpiness using that. So again, just experiment a little bit. Now another thing that can help with this is to add some asymmetrical detail. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and reset my brush. So now I would just want to add some little sort of moles here. So I'm going to decrease the brush size, and I'm just going to add some moles. Let me take the strength of pressure down a little bit. And so just asymmetrically, I'll add a little, kind of a bigger one up here. You can also use wax if you want more of kind of a flattened look. That's a little bit too big. So something like that, and then maybe come down here and add a couple right down there. And just that asymmetry and having those little irregularities will really help add some realism to it. Okay, so I'm not going to go too crazy, just add a few bumps here and there to kind of complement our skin texture, and that gives us a bit more of a realistic version of that 2D creature that we created before. So in the next lesson, let's come in and start to add some materials to this. So we'll also tweak the eye geometry a little bit in the process, and I'm just going to name this something appropriate, and let me turn the visibility off, and let's concentrate on the eye really quickly. So let's go to lines, and so I want to be able to smooth this. You can see the faceting on this sphere. So anytime we have polygon geometry, when we want to create a smooth final result, we can use a subdivision surface. So it's this box right here. So we'll go ahead and drop that in, and just like with the other things in Cinema 4D, how it's parented is going to determine how it works. So we'll take the sphere and drop it underneath the subdivision surface, and there you can see the resulting smooth surface. Now we'd like this edge here to be a bit sharper. So one of the things that we can do here is just to add some edges. So come to polygon mode and make sure to select the sphere, right click, and I'm going to use the knife. I'm going to change the mode of the knife from line to loop. That will allow me to come in. You can see the preview here of where that loop is going to be before I click. And I'll just click here, and let's also add one over here on the other side. Now when we create a smooth surface, you can see that we get a nice sharp line there to define the eye. Okay, so now looking at this eye, we want to have 3 different parts of this eye material-wise. And so let's select those parts and create some tags for those. And to see that a little bit better, I'll turn the lines back on. Okay, so the main part of the eye we don't need a tag for, but I want to tag the iris and also the pupil. So let's come in here, and with that sphere selected, I'm going to select all those polygons in the center. We're going to go to select, set selection, and then we're going to name this something. So we'll just call this pupil. I'm over here on the right, lower right. That adds a polygon selection tag. See this little orange triangle here. So if I click off of this, you can see I can really quickly go back and select whatever is contained within that tag. Let's do the same thing here. So I'm going to come in and select all of these, and then I want to grow the selection, and then I want to tag it. So select, set selection, and I want to make sure that I don't have this tag selected. You see it overwrote that particular information. So let's do this again. We'll select that. Got that tag selected. Set selection. Okay. Now I want to make sure to click off of it. Go back to the sphere. And then grow the selection. Set selection. And that creates a new tag. Okay, so be aware of that. You don't want to have that selection tag selected. So now I can select this and this. Okay, let's create some materials now. We'll turn the creature back on and turn the lines off. Let's set up some materials. So the first material we'll create, we're going to go down here to the lower section here, our material manager. We're going to go create new material. Let's double click on our material. That'll open up a material editor, and we'll call this one pupil material. Now we can set different channels here. So we'll select color. Now let's just choose black for the color. And we don't really need it to be shiny, so I'm going to turn off the specularity. Let's create another material. This time we want this to be sort of the eye. So we'll go eye main. And the color, let's go ahead and leave it. Maybe add a little bit of red to it. And we'll leave the specularity, kind of tighten it up a little bit. We can also turn on reflection. Turn that reflectivity down a bit. So that's going to be the main part of our eye. Let's create our alien body. Body material. And in the color, let's you can add whatever color you want. I'm going to add kind of a blue color, but you can make him whatever color you want. So something like that for now. So we haven't assigned any of these materials yet. Let's create our iris color, and can make this just for now maybe kind of a red. And now let's start to kind of assign these materials. So we'll assign the white material to the eye. So let's assign it, actually, you can assign it to the subdivision surface, or we can assign it to the sphere itself. So you can see it assigned there, but you can see everything is white. So let's also apply the pupil. And let's also apply the iris color. So now all three of these materials have been assigned, but we need to tell the model which parts of it should go where. And so we have these selection tags that we can use. So for the iris, we'll select the texture tag, which is this little thing right here. And under selection in our tag properties, I'm going to put in iris. So that'll only assign that material to the polygons associated with this tag. Let's select the black one, and this time under selection we'll put in pupil. And that'll only assign it to the pupil, and then everything else gets that white material. Let's choose the body material and drop it onto our creature. And that gives us this nice blue color, kind of electric color. So at any time now we can come in and we can change parts of our material. So we could change the color, and that'll update within our view. Okay, we could change the color of the iris real quickly just by changing the color in here. If we want it to be a bit more saturated or maybe more orange, you can see that update. And so all those surface attributes you can change within your specific material. Now once we've got some simple materials added, let's in the next lesson take a look at some of the ways that we can start to render this object. So make a nice final image that'll go along